Right, so welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for February's check-in. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Let's see here. There we go. So Rob Greenhaw is going to help me with the presentation today, and we are going to be talking about working with newcomers today. And that seems to be a hot topic right now. So we thought that would be a good thing to talk about. So get on the screen here. There we go. Again, this is our February check-in. As always, our community agreements have not changed. I found this really nice quote at the bottom for this month. It says, "Once I thought to write a history of the immigrants in America, then I discovered that the immigrants were American history." And that was Oscar Handlin from an American historian from Harvard University. So I thought that was very fitting. And today we're going to kind of cover all of the areas in our blueprint for success. And again, that link to the blueprint is at the bottom of the screen and it's in your note taker. Today's agenda, we're going to be looking at who are newcomer English learners, what are their needs, and how can we design our programs to meet their needs. And then we'll do some updates this time at the end. And I'm going to go ahead and go to the next screen. I think I'm going to turn it over to Rob to get started. And I'm going to put the link in the note taker again. Okay, Rob, so I'll let you take it away.
All right. Thanks, Cammie. I'm Rob, and I'm the Mel consultant from St. Louis. I think I know a lot of you. I do a supporting newcomer English learners workshop in St. Louis every year, and thought we'd use some of that material in today's check-in. So we're going to talk about who are newcomers. Cammie, I'm going to let you be my slide person. So kind of a wishy-washy term, so not strictly defined. For whenever I do my workshop, I usually talk about a newcomer being a student who is new to the United States. I usually define it as less than 2 years in the United States and new to American culture and also new to English. So when we talk newcomers, we're not talking about kids new to the United States who are intermediate or advanced proficiency necessarily. We're usually talking about students who are very new to English and need significant support. But as you can see from the slide, there's multiple definitions. These students might also have other terms associated with them. So sometimes newcomers are refugees or asylees. These two terms are really similar. It mostly, what differentiates the two is where you apply for protection, basically. So a refugee applies to enter with refugee status before coming into the United States, whereas an asylee is a person who is already in the United States, but due to circumstances in their home country, would like to seek asylum or not return to their home country. But both of those individuals their circumstances in what they would call their home country, where it's usually violence or some type of persecution that they don't feel safe returning to them. Sometimes we refer to newcomers as new Americans. A term that's a little bit more recent is SLIFE or SIFE. So this is students with either limited or interrupted formal education. So essentially students who have missed out on assistant schooling, right? So not only are they new to English, but they maybe have missed a whole school year or multiple school years. And so they're lacking some of the foundational content knowledge you might expect a student of their age to have. Also, SLIFE and SIFE tends to be used with kids in older grades. You don't usually call like an elementary kid a SLIFE or a SIFE student. I suppose you could, but tends to be referring to secondary students. Immigrant. So to be an immigrant, obviously our newcomer ELs are immigrants. They were born in another country and are new to the United States, but immigrant as a coding as far as DESE is concerned is anyone who's been in US schools for less than 3 years. There's actually a separate funding. So there's Title III funding and there's also immigrant funds. So keeping track of all of your immigrant students, whether they are English learners or not English learners, is important, because if your district has an influx of immigrant students, you tend to get some funding from it's either the state or the feds, but and it's always in response to an increase in number. So if your number of immigrant students tends to stay the same, you usually don't see that funding. But if you show like, oh, hey, we had 5 and now we have 15, maybe there's some kind of funds to help you deal with that. That slide that Cami was just on was basically showing that what is it? Individuals from Puerto Rico, Cami, are also considered immigrants, even though it's a territory of the United States.
Yes. They're one of the few the only territory now that we recognize as being a US. Everyone else is outside of the US.
Yeah. And I think our other term there was unaccompanied minor. So obviously it's exactly what it sounds. So an individual who's under the age of 18 who's entering the country without their parent. All right, Cami, skip ahead, I think. So our newcomers are going to have different amounts of educational background. Individuals who are literate and have grade level skills, those kids are they're going to rock and roll. They're going to learn English quickly, right? So if they're literate in their home language and they've had consistent schooling, those kids are going to have typically the fastest rate of English acquisition. Kids who are maybe have had consistent schooling, but maybe are not literate in their home language or something like that, sometimes they still they'll obviously acquire English, but maybe not as quickly. And then as we talked about our SLIFE or our SIFE students, those are really students that need significant support. They're not only new to English, but they have significant gaps, maybe are not literate in their home language. Maybe they haven't even been in a school setting in several years, if ever. So big time risk of dropping out with those students. So be aware and prepared and have a plan to support those individuals. So the next 2 slides are just overall where are newcomer students coming from. Talking about what 37%, is that what I said? 37? Oh, 13.7. Sorry, I had my it's like 37 is high. 13.7% of the overall population being immigrants. Quarter of those are coming from Mexico. We have many other countries represented here. And then the next slide, also the links there are kind of neat maps that you can kind of put in a country and see over time how much of, so like India was like really slow immigration, and then over the last 15, 20 years has really gone up a lot. So it's kind of, if you're curious, they're kind of fun maps to play with. I think I'll do a little interaction here. So we have the majority of our foreign-born students are from Mexico, but obviously we have newcomers from a variety of countries. I think I might have you put in the chat, where are you seeing immigrant students coming from or newcomer English learners coming from in your schools? So if you would, put a few things in the chat. What countries are your newcomers from? Afghanistan, Colombia, Guatemala, El Salvador, Cuba, Albania. Lisa Carson. Cuba,
Hi, Rob.
Mexico, Pakistan, India, Germany. Awesome. Yeah, Honduras was so the unaccompanied minor, from what I understand, there was a big influx of unaccompanied minors from Honduras about, I don't know, maybe that was 3 or 4 years ago. But lots of violence going on in that country. All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks for participating there. Obviously, we're seeing Ukrainians and Afghani refugees. Go ahead, Cami. We've shown you this before, I think, but mostly showing that we've had a steady increase of English learners in our state. We're approaching 40,000 English learners statewide. It sounds like a lot. It is a lot, but it also, I don't know. I always think of Los Angeles School District in California has like 150,000 English learners in one school district. So I'm always kind of like, 40,000 is a lot, but there are actual school districts in other parts of the state with, 3 times that. So, our good buddy Valentina Gonzalez made us a wonderful infographic here. So talking about our most prevalent languages, what percentage of ELs are making up our population, what is our EL graduation rate, if we're a WIDA state or not. We are, obviously. So if you're not familiar with Valentina Gonzalez, she's a great blog and Twitter follow, and she's always making wonderful infographics. Speaking of languages, I'm going to have you guys do another little put in the chat here about languages that your newcomers are speaking. So obviously Spanish nationwide is our biggest chunk, and it's also the biggest chunk in Missouri. The 3 top languages of ELs in Missouri are Spanish, Arabic, and Somali. And Somali kind of crept in there. I think it was Bosnian maybe 5 or 6 years ago. So anyway, if you would put us in the chat, what languages are your newcomer students speaking? Russian, Spanish and Chinese, Spanish. Spanish and Turkish. I think I pronounced that right. Farsi, Dari. Is Dari not supported by Google Translate? I think I read that. I think I saw that recently. I think Microsoft Translator has Dari, but maybe Google Translate doesn't have Dari. Fun fact. But not fun if you only use Google Translate and you have a Dari speaker. All right. Oh, Shelly's got me. She says that's true. All right. Thanks, Cami. Cami, is this you?
Yes,
right.
it is. I had to unmute. All right. So we're going to talk a little bit about what are some of the unique needs of our English newcomers. And so we have several contributing factors, like what was their first home language use, whether they're fluent in both languages, whether they can speak their home language. Some of them we can kind of say they're between languages. They don't really have full use of their home language, but they haven't learned English yet. So that's a factor. How much literacy they have, how much education, as Rob said, their family values. Are girls not allowed to go to school? Some of that cultural that goes in there, whether they've had interrupted education, trauma, the roles of their family and their responsibilities. Are they caretakers? And some of the social cultural differences, language distance, how far is their language from English? Some of them are very similar in English as far as sounds and the order of words and things, and some of them are completely different. So that's a factor. There are other factors as well. The newcomer kit that's prepared by the U.S. Department of Education has a whole chapter, chapter 4, that is talking about the needs of our English learners. So that's something that I would recommend going and reading if you have a chance. And we're going to talk about a few other things that come from the newcomer kit here as we go along, including this one. So we're not going to do this, but this is a really good activity for you to take back to your schools that you can utilize. It gives a vignette of, I think there were 5 different students from different nationalities with different levels of English ability and different levels of schooling. And it kind of talks about their needs and different approaches to working with them. So if you have a chance, that's chapter 1 of the Newcomer Toolkit. It gives you something that you could utilize with your school district. And then we have some different things on the DESE website that as well that you can use to help with your newcomers. That we have like the enrolling and graduating ELs, and our graduation handbook talks about setting up courses for your newcomers and how you can spread them out over several years. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. There's also this counselor's companion that goes, it's from, I think, Minnesota, but it goes into great depth about ways you can work with newcomers and gives some great ideas that are for any state working with newcomers. And then I recently discovered West Palm Beach's resources. One thing that they have are all of the different countries, what their school system looks like. You can look at their grading system, how they divide their school year. That would be helpful as well to a counselor who's setting up coursework. Then we have our DESE enrolling and graduating guidance, and it goes through discussing about students can stay in school until they're 21 years old. After that, you don't get money for them from the state. You could continue to keep them there, but you wouldn't get any support from the state for them. And it's a local decision. And then it talks about some cases school boards can approve students to graduate without the required 24 hours of credit or 24 credits. So you have to have that in written form and it has to be board approved. And then the last thing on this slide is talking about failing grades. And I've gotten a lot of questions in the last couple of weeks about whether or not you can retain English learners. And the crux of all of it is, yes, you can if you have given them all of the accommodations and all of the modifications and all of supports, you've documented that you have done everything in your power to provide them all of the opportunities to learn. And if after giving them all of those opportunities, they're still not successful, that's when you can think about retaining. But unless you've documented all of that and you have proof that you've done it, you shouldn't be retaining them. So we can't retain them at all based on lack of English, which I've seen in a few cases. All right. And then here are those scheduling considerations. We have a 4-year plan and a 5-year plan and 3-year plans listed in our guidance document that I showed a moment ago. And then supporting EL's pathway to graduation. This one is from Dr. Stair Finner, and she shares her presentation from, I think it was from WIDA 2 years ago, and a Padlet as well. And then this document from New York goes through, again, sort of like the Minnesota document, telling you just some of the things that are available to you as far as working with and looking at transcripts. And again, with Rhode Island's as well, talking about how to support SLIFE students. But things from other states that carry over across states.
And Cam, I'm gonna chime in here that
Yes.
I get questions about scheduling high school courses for newcomers and pathways to graduation all the time.
Yes.
And I share these resources and there's good information in these resources, but I would love to talk to anybody who's maybe either on this call or watching the recording. If you feel like your school district has been successful at putting together a good course of study for newcomers in high school, and you want to share your, like, basically, I share resources, but I'd love to put people in touch with people who actually have done it and been successful, or have a process that's working for them. So if anyone feels like their district is doing this well, please email me or Cami. I'd love to talk to you about it.
Exactly. And we'd love to put something together from our state, but at this point, why reinvent something that's already there? But if you have things that we're doing in Missouri, definitely we'd like to promote that and build on that as well. Thank you, Rob. All right, so a couple of misconceptions that I've encountered in dealing with districts. One is that people think that newcomers have to have language proficiency before they can start working on content, which is not true. Helping them learn language through content is what our new standards are all about. So our new 2020 standards framework is talking about how we can incorporate all of the content standards into our language, into all of the content standards. And then the second misconception says that students need simplified content and language as they learn. We don't need to simplify the content, we need to make it comprehensible and make it accessible for them. So we're not simplifying what they're learning, we're simplifying the approach to learning for them. So we may have to give them a lower text, but it's the same content and the same idea. And then we supplement that as they gain understanding with other things, so that the idea and the rigor of what they're learning is there. It's just the approach to learning it is simplified somewhat. And that's hard for some people to grasp. The third misconception is that students can only learn one language at a time, and bilingualism is counterproductive. And that research has found that that is far from the truth, that having literacy in your first language positively affects learning in a second language, and you have more connections in your brain, you're better at processing, you're better at figuring out problems, you're a better problem solver. There are just many benefits to being bilingual. And the fourth misconception is that not all educators who work with ELs need to be specially trained. We love for everyone to know how to work with them, but everyone should have at least some professional development. And we definitely need specialized teachers who know how to work with English learners and especially meet the needs of newcomers. So without that support, they're not going to be successful or as successful. So we definitely need everyone to have as much training as possible. And that's what we're advocating for. So how do we respond effectively to the needs of our newcomers who are English learners? And we're going to talk about the what do we do. So there's a little acronym here for what. The first thing we want to do is welcome them. And that's, people are always saying, I have my first English learner. What do I do? Well, first of all, you welcome them into your school and make them feel comfortable there. Then you harness what you have. Then you have to work on assessing where they're at. And then what I usually say is you have to teach them just like you teach any other student. You have to meet their needs. So the first one is welcoming them. And how do we do that? How do we make them feel welcome, integrated, and valued? That's a good question. We have a little short video here, hopefully that you can hear. I took a little snippet out of it, but you can listen to the whole thing on your own later. Let's see if I can get it to play here. There we go.
Think about what it's like to enter a new school. It means new people, new routines, and new rules. Now imagine that you also can't understand what anyone is saying, including your teachers. That sounds pretty intimidating to me. For most English language learners, or ELLs, that's exactly the situation they face every day. An unfamiliar school, language, and culture. That's why a supportive and accepting teacher is so important to their success. By creating a welcoming and language-rich classroom environment, teachers can help make students' transitions a lot easier.
The biggest
Amber Prentice teaches 7th and 8th grade ELLs in St. Paul, Minnesota.
State, continent, country.
With the help of her students, she's ready to show us what goes into making a welcoming classroom environment.
And Earth is the biggest one.
School starts pretty early though, so let's wake these kids up.
Earth. Hands on your head. Hands on your head. Hands on your shoulders. Hands on your head. Hands on your lap. Eyes all the way over here.
Now that everyone's attention is focused, let's look at some strategies for helping every student feel welcome in the classroom. This is one of the most critical things you can offer any student. With ELLs, this is especially important.
I call it deer in the headlights. They're so nervous and they're so scared and their eyes are just looking at you like, please don't ask me to talk. Please don't ask me to do anything. And just know that they're going to be nervous and just try to make them feel as comfortable as you can.
And it doesn't take much. Simple things like pronouncing students' names correctly, learning a few words in their language, and displaying their work make a big difference. The easiest tip of all?
Smile, smiles, everyone smiles.
Susan LaFond taught ELLs for 20 years.
Sometimes you will get people that when they're perplexed or worried, whatever it may be, they'll start crossing their arms or they'll have that closed body language. Really important to keep it open so the students feel, hey, maybe you do want to have me here. And the easiest thing to do and the cheapest is to smile.
Amber is all smiles for her class. She tries to make new students feel welcome from day one by introducing them to the class, assigning them a buddy, and discussing their arrival with her other students.
Today is David's first day. He is our new student.
Usually I'm given about 1 or 2 days notice that a student will come and I will first prepare the class. If we have a student who speaks the new student's language, I will ask the student to be his buddy and I'll talk to the class about ways we can make new students feel welcome.
I want you to think about all the things you can do to help David in school and help him know where to go and what to do.
Rules, routines, and structure are key things for all ELLs, but especially for newcomers. They're not just entering a new school, they're entering a new culture. They'll benefit from clear goals and expectations like a posted class schedule and daily routines.
All right, what do you guys need to do? Just copy and answer the question while I do some attendance.
For example, before each class, Amber writes a review question on the board. Her students know their first task of the period is to copy down and answer the question. This provides students with a clear expectation, gives Amber the chance to take attendance,
Try.
encourages students to review material they've learned, and helps Amber monitor student comprehension.
Which one is bigger? Yeah, students know what the expectations are and what the routine is. That lowers their anxiety. They can just worry about the academics and the learning of English.
If students don't feel comfortable, they're not going to take the risk. If they don't risk, they're not going to learn. So that predictability gives a nice, stable environment where they feel comfortable, comfortable to make mistakes, comfortable to grow and to learn.
Excellent.
Okay, I'm going to stop it there. So how did this school welcome newcomer ELs? Can you put in the chat some ideas that you saw that they used in this classroom to make them feel welcome? Give you a few moments to type in something you noticed that they did. Assigning a buddy is always a good thing. Preparing them for a new student, introducing the student, a peer helper. Yes, those are all great. Another moment. Welcoming at the door, that's a big one. Talking about the schedule each day, pronouncing their names, also a great one. Yes. And a friendly teacher with a smile on her face, that always helps. Yes, exactly. Those are all great things that we need to remember. Is there anything that she didn't or we didn't hear in the video that you do in your district that you'd like to share on how you welcome school or students to your school? Oh, slowly and precise and concisely too. Yes, that's also helpful. I liked how she enunciated her words and spoke very clearly. Well, I'm going to let you drop things in there if you think of them on how you welcome them. I'm not seeing anything. And we'll, oh, a visual schedule. Yes, very good. Oh, it gives a family tour before they begin. That's great too. Yes. All right, we'll come back and check on any others that have been added. I'm going to move on for the sake of time. If I click out of the picture, there we go. So things to consider when you're thinking about welcoming students to your school. Who are their first contacts? Who represents your school when they're talking to the newcomer families? What information are you gathering from them to help determine placement for your newcomers? Are you having that conversation with the student and their family to find out what their experience with school has been and where they are, what classes they've taken? Having that conversation is very helpful. What information is most important to relay to them at your first meeting, like schedules and buses and all of that? Are you getting all of that to them in a language they understand? And what interpretation services are available if they need them? And letting parents know how they can get access to interpreters or translations is also very important. This is a really neat newcomer guide that I don't remember where I found it, but I wanted to share it with you. If you click on the picture, it will take you to this resource that gives you from day one all the way through the second week of school, getting them ready. It has a picture guide on how to set up their schedule for the student. It's just a really nice resource I wanted to make available to you. So that's there. This is talking about morning meetings and circle time in the mornings and how that's important for building community in your classroom, which is also very important. I'm going to let you watch that on your own time. And then talking about social emotional learning and making the children comfortable. This resource from Castle has several activities that you can do to start your day and end your day. So we wanted to share that with you as well. And that brings
Hey, Cammie.
Yes, go ahead.
I feel like our slide 39 goes better with this part that we're doing right now. Would you
jump forward?
drag 39 up real quick and let me talk about
Sure,
it?
I can do that. Let me see here. I gotta get over here.
Sorry.
That's okay. Just gotta find it here. 39, we're right there. You want to talk about Rob?
Yeah, sure. So I borrowed this idea from St. Louis Public Schools. So when they welcome a new family who has immigrated from another country, they share a version of this handbook, which is a publication from an organization called Bridging Refugee Youth and Children's Services, or BRICS. And Cam, if you'll just click on the link real quick and scroll down. If you scroll down to, like, I don't know, 3/4 of the way down, there's a section called publications. So toolkits, webinars, and then publications. So they have 3 different ones: raising children in a new country, raising teens in a new country, raising young children in a new country. And they have them PDFs available in English and other languages. Oh, Fabiola knows these. They're illustrated, so easier to kind of comprehend. They basically talk about sort of social norms and social expectations about being in the United States. Things like, we typically don't leave children alone in the car, and we don't do physical discipline in the school, and so kind of like things that maybe individuals who are new to the United States wouldn't be aware of as being sort of a social norm or even a law in our country. I think mostly what I would say is, I think it's a good way of giving new families more information about what it's like to do school in the United States. But I also think, like, I've had some people think like some of the pages are a little bit too almost kind of forcing US culture on individuals rather than letting them practice their own cultural beliefs. And so mostly I would say, look at it yourself and you can determine which pages you think are maybe useful to share with parents. And anyway, I think if you're ever looking for more information to offer new families on what it's like to have children in American schools, I think it's got some good ideas in there and things that maybe we don't always think about as far as sharing with parents.
Very good. I agree. And I believe I still have that linked on the DESE webpage as well for ELD in the resources guide section. All right. So the next part we're going to talk about is harnessing. And this is talking about, well, our staff, and then schedules and materials and protocols. Kind of what we spoke about earlier this year when we talked about your LOU plans, being prepared for your students, having the things you need in place and using them efficiently. So the greatest resource that we have for this is the Newcomer Toolkit again, and it walks you through setting up a newcomer program. But also the Dear Colleagues letter really speaks to working with newcomers and how you should set up your program and how you should staff it. So I would refer you to those two resources for more information on that topic. The next thing is assessing. And of course we assess through Access, the academic part, but we also talk about the linguistic part and the cultural, social, emotional, economic, and family parts of learning. So how do we monitor all of those things together? One thing we need to keep in mind is that instruction leverages EL's home language. When we talk about their home language and their cultural and their prior knowledge, it just helps us allow our students to learn better. And it moves them forward when we take those things into account. So when we're doing lessons with them and when we're working them and when we're testing them, we need to keep in mind, are we assessing what they know or what they know in English? And that's always what I was asking classroom teachers when they're talking about, well, the students just can't do this. And I said, well, are you assessing what they know? Do you know they can't do it? Or can they not do it in English? And that's something we need to always keep in the forefront of our minds when we're working with them. Because a lot of times they can do it. Okay, Rob, I think you're going to take over at this point, weren't you?
Yeah.
Okay.
So again, we want an asset orientation with our newcomers. And the best way to do that is to find out as much as you can about your newcomers. So putting together something like an EL student portrait, gathering all these different points of data about your student, figuring out what is your student really interested in, what has their schooling experiences been, maybe even talking with their parents about, you know, what is a talent you see in your child, or what are your hopes and dreams for your child. Things like home visits are super awesome as long as everyone's comfortable, as long as the family's comfortable with you visiting and you're comfortable going to visit. It's a great way to kind of learn about assets the student might have. I think the really neat thing is that these students are going to have all kinds of background knowledge and life experiences that your other students won't have. And so they're going to be able to, you know, personally connect to some of the things you might be teaching about, whereas it maybe is more of an abstract idea to some of your native English speaking students. So I think anytime you're able to really leverage either their bilingualism or multilingualism or their cultural practices or life experiences to not only help them learn, but also kind of enrich instruction for all students. So that's always a great thing. Yeah, so we typically talk about, I think we should skip the video, Cami, just in the interest of time. We typically talk about like three major things really with all English learners, but it's good to keep in mind with newcomers. And these come from, there's something called the Understanding Language Initiative from Stanford, and they have like three major components. So they talk about opportunities to learn. So basically making sure we're exposing our kids to grade level content, We talk about an asset orientation where we're recognizing the skills and the experiences that they're bringing to the classroom, and that we're helping them develop autonomy. So really, if we're doing all those things with English learners and newcomers, then you're doing it right. So in the sort of full day workshop, I usually kind of like look at a piece of instruction with newcomers just to kind of see, like, notice that we're not teaching them first grade science when they're in high school. We're still letting them understand, high school grade level appropriate concepts. We're just putting it in a way that they can understand. And Cami makes a really great point about what are we assessing? We want to know, did they understand the content? Do they know the content? And so if we're asking, I think that's a great thing for teachers to always keep in mind is my assessment really finding out that they understand the content that I was hoping to teach? Or is my assessment really also testing, can they write an essay or something, which is maybe not necessarily what I needed to know? So there's a really great quote that's like, we can't wait for language proficiency to teach kids content. And that's really the mindset to have, is that our students need to be learning content from day one, and they're gonna get English, but we're not gonna wait for them to have English before we start helping them learn content. If you want to learn more about the cultures of your students, first of all, ELL 2.0 is an awesome website. If you've never checked that out, you should go to ELL 2.0. And then this is a sort of choice board sort of thing they put together about different websites that'll teach you all about sort of the different cultures and social norms in different cultures and school systems of different countries. So definitely, if you're like, hey, I'm getting a new kid who's from the Ukraine tomorrow, it would be great to jump on here and look up Ukraine and see what is life like in Ukraine, what are kind of social norms in Ukraine, and be a little bit prepared for what to expect.
And it's great to share this with students in the class. You could do a class study of what it's like in that country. Just
Yeah,
get
absolutely.
them ready.
Did that one. This is still available, I believe, as an e-workshop on our WIDA website. So there's all these e-workshops. They're free to public schools in Missouri. If you ever go on the WIDA webpage and you go to professional learning, you'll see these e-workshops. They have a great video on leveraging home language use. I think I took some of the key points on the following slides, Cami, if you'll. So kind of loving these quotes about the linguistic and cultural identities reflected in the school experience is sending a message that they're contributing members of their school community. And then ideas for like instruction is incorporating first language into like a morning chant, letting students maybe read about a topic in their first language and then having them read about it in English, or read about it in their first language and then talking with a peer in English, letting them write first in their first language and then helping them put those ideas into English, grouping kids with home students who have the same home language to sort of make meaning and talk about their understanding. Solid practices that kind of go with the idea of translanguaging, which is also sort of a newer concept going on. So Ofelia Garcia is sort of one of the lead researchers or authors of text on translanguaging. It's basically saying true bilinguals are always interchanging between two languages. And so in our brains, we don't actually have an English spot and a Spanish spot and we switch between, but we have a language spot, right? So if you're truly bilingual, you are having thoughts in both languages. You are probably communicating to other bilinguals using both languages. And then translanguaging in the classroom is basically saying, again, what we really want is for kids to learn content, to meet standards. And if they prefer to learn about content in a home language, we should give them that opportunity, and basically making sure we're giving kids the opportunity to use their full linguistic repertoire to both learn about content and show their understanding of content. The link there at the bottom is sort of an educator's guide. It gives like sort of some practical ideas for getting translanguaging going in your classrooms. And that's from New York state initiative for emergent bilinguals. These are all tech tools. Microsoft Immersive Reader is awesome. Basically, it can translate text. It can read text aloud to you in the home language. So if you have a student who's not literate in Arabic and only understands spoken Arabic, then using a tool like Immersive Reader can have text read aloud to them in their home language. So finding a way to give them access to Microsoft Immersive Reader is a great tool. Lots of links there to learn more about it. Translation apps. Look, bottom line is, if you're doing a formal meeting or sending home a formal document, don't use these things, okay? Desi and Rob and everyone is saying, this is not for formal communications. However, if you need student to student, you want, hey, you're gonna do a turn and talk and I don't want you to just sit there and do nothing. Maybe you can let them use your phone and use a translation app. Or if you're in a pinch with a parent and need to communicate with them, a lot of these have real-time translators. So if I set it to English and the other one is Spanish, when I say something in English, my phone will say it in Spanish. When they say something in Spanish, it'll repeat it back to me in English. We can more or less communicate. It's going to be difficult for younger kids who maybe can't pronounce, maybe their ability to speak in their first language is not quite as clear for software to pick up accurately. But usually, as far as like a teacher trying to get a point across to a student, it can be pretty effective. So those are ideas. Also, the Google one and the Microsoft one have like cameras. You can like take pictures of things and have them. I mean, technology is crazy, folks. Leslie's saying add talking points. She loves that too. So I've heard of that tool also. Again, this is for like in a pinch stuff, not for your IEP meetings or anything. Microsoft Translator wants educators to use them. You should check out what they have to offer. Another sort of thing from ELL 2.0 is sort of these pre-made dictionaries that have, it's basically using Google Sheets and Google Translate, so kids could kind of type in a word they need, it'll come up in their language. They can add images. They can even have like a pronunciation on there. Pretty neat. Probably a good way to help kids out there. This is, bye Katie, good to see you. Unite for Literacy. This is my favorite website of all time. Well, maybe not of all time, but it's a great one. And especially for younger students, kindergarten through second grade, it's perfect. Older kids, maybe if they're like by themselves and not in front of peers where they might be embarrassed. So it's very little kiddie type of books, but you can get the text in English, you can get the text in Spanish, and then there's so many different narrated languages and they get real speakers of those languages. So it's not like a robotic Ukrainian speaker, it's an actual Ukrainian speaker reading the text aloud to the students so they can hear the text in Ukrainian and then also hear it in English. It's like, you don't need a login or anything. Like showing this to parents is awesome. So if you're not already familiar with Unite for Literacy, it's wonderful. There's some other links there. Multiliteracy.net is our sort of Missouri State initiative by Dr. Hellman and co. And they're starting to get more and more resources of multilingual text. If you have Spanish speakers, Discovery Education has a whole lot of like videos and articles and things in Spanish. So I'd recommend checking that out. Common Lit has a good translation feature for their text. You can get sort of text at different levels and also have translation features. So definitely would recommend using those types of resources. Tracy says Khan Academy also is great for that. Leslie's looking for math supports. Sorry, I'm all up on the chat. Okay, YouTube, if you're not already doing this, you can always turn on closed captioning. First of all, just always closed caption. And then if they're watching a video by themselves, maybe you tell them how to do the closed captioning in their home language so they can get Spanish subtitles or Spanish closed captioning. You can slow down the speed of the video. And if you put it at 0.75, it's a little bit slower, but not super noticeable. So kids can watch a video where they're talking a little bit slower, but it doesn't sound too weird. So definitely click on that little gear on the YouTube video and you can do the playback speed and knock it down to 0.75. That could be helpful for newcomers. All right. We're on the T for teach.
Yeah, so here's the T of our what, and that's teaching our students. How do we design language instruction for literacy and content to meet the needs of our English learners? So one thing, we're working towards autonomy for our students. We want to give them the tools when we're working with them individually so that they can carry those into the other content areas, into other situations and other settings. So we want to empower them with that information. And we use those formative assessments that we give them to gather data and to know what things they need so that we can tailor instruction to fit their needs. There is a link to teaching channel here, but unless you have a subscription, you can't get to it, but you get one free video if you want to use your free video to watch it. That's a good one to watch. All right, we also have, the WIDA supports the scaffolds that they suggest. So we have sensory, graphic, interactive, and verbal and textual supports that we promote for classroom teachers to use with our students. And I know several schools who have walked teachers through one of these at a time, just giving them an idea of what it looks like and demonstrating, maybe teaching, co-teaching in their classroom and showing them what this looks like in their classroom. So there are lots of ways that we can get this message out there of what works with our English learners and make sure that they're available and accessible to all classrooms. We'll skip this video, but I suggest going back and watching it. It's really cute, talking about how we need to build the field, how we need to set that background knowledge and the experiences that our students need to understand what we're talking about in the classroom. So giving them that pre-teaching and providing them with the vocabulary if they don't have it, all those things that makes the content comprehensible and gives them what they need to understand what's going on in the classroom, even when they're not with us. One of those things are sentence frames and word banks, and not just putting a word bank on the wall and expecting them to learn the words and be able to use them, but using them with them and guiding them through practice so that they build understanding of the words. So I've had teachers tell me, well, I provided them with a word bank, but you have to go beyond that and show them how to use them and help them to practice and internalize them. Also pointing out cognates, that's a big one. We have a list here from Colorado, Colorado of the Spanish-English cognates for you, and then some bilingual glossaries and cognates from New York University that's very good. So just providing you with some resources. And then one of the last things, if you've ever watched Carol Salva, she talks this up all the time, the QSSSA model, where we question, then we signal when we're ready, we provide them with a stem so that they are able to communicate with us, then we share with each other, and then we assess whether they have understanding. So the next couple of slides are just talking the script that you use with QSSSA and why we do each part. And then here's an example of how you would use it in a classroom. And the last thing here is a video of Carol utilizing this in her classroom and what it looks like that we'll let you watch on your own.
Cam, I'm gonna jump in on that.
Please do.
First of all, if you're not familiar with Carol Salva, you should definitely read Boosting Achievement and check out some of her work because she's just the best. She's all about using two big approaches, which is language experience approach and QSSSA. And in this video, she's doing both. Right. Basically, QSSSA is providing kids with an opportunity to sort of talk with each other and figure out what do they already know about a topic, or what do they have anything to say about a particular topic or idea? And then the language experience approach is all about co-creating text with kids and chorally reading that text and using that text maybe throughout the week. And they're just both like, they're solid strategies in general and can be applied in the gen ed classroom. But if you're doing newcomer stuff in like a pull-out setting, things like language experience approach, where you're helping the kid, you're doing a co-created text where you're saying, you know, find out what the kid is interested in. Are they interested in soccer? Tell me about a fun time you had playing soccer, and use a translation tool and see if you can get their ideas and put them in paper. And so you're scribing and you're going to chorally read this text with them, and they're going to know a little bit about what the text is about because they're helping you write it. And it's basically using this co-created text as a tool to teach more and more literacy skills throughout the week. I think it's amazing what she does with it. So I highly recommend using both language experience approach and QSSA, really with all English learners, but especially for newcomers.
Well, and it doesn't allow them to sit there and be quiet. They're required to interact and be a part of the class. And it gets them to where they want to interact with the class. So it's building that rapport with your classroom so that they're comfortable. That's the first key, but this gives you that avenue to do so. And students really, they buy into it and they accept it and they do participate. All right. I think that was the last. Yes, it was. As far as our presentation, the last part of this are just some updates for the month. March has access Q&A webinars that you can access through the secure portal on the webinar section. One is on March 7th. The other one is March 14th. And then we have help for, they are asking that we help inform the professional learning offerings in the future. So there are some surveys that they would appreciate your input on. Those close on March 5th. That link will take you to the surveys to help them form what offerings they'll have for our free workshops that we offer you throughout the year. So if you have new ideas or things that you want to see, this is your opportunity to participate. Okay. And then they have a call for WIDA Fellows nominations. And there is a link there that takes you to that form to fill out if you want to nominate someone as a WIDA Fellow, and explains a little bit more about what that involves. Then from US Ed, we have a post-secondary college and career CTE flyer that they created that's very well done. I wanted to share that with you and let you have access to that. And then these are all newer things from the US Department of Education. We have one on Afghan evacuees, sign language and English learners. That was a big discussion that we had in our last meeting with the Department of Education, and saying, did they count sign language as, or ESL as an ESL students who speak sign language, are they counted as ESL? And they said no. If they're talking with their parents and using sign language, said in most cases they understand English, they just have a different way of sharing their English, but they didn't consider them, the federal government did not consider them to be English learners. So I thought that was interesting, but you can go on and look at their response through that link. And then some infographics on the benefits of being multilingual, and a few videos on Hispanic heritage and language, the assets for career preparedness. Again, kind of tied to that CTE. Last month was CTE month. And then this was a multilingual symposium with different perspectives on being diverse, which was very interesting. And then finally, from the US Department of Ed, we had a big discussion about foreign exchange students, and I've gotten that question from different places throughout our state. So we posed it to the federal government and asked for their input, and this was their response. They said, if you have a foreign exchange student in your school and you find that they are not proficient, then you are obligated to provide services for them and they should be access tested. So basically, they count as an ESL if they need your help. That comes straight from them. And then again, as Rob was talking about a moment ago, we have these e-learning web series that you can take anytime, self-paced. This e-learning webpage will take you to a description of what each one of them has in it. You have until, let's see, August of 2023 to view these and look through them. You can do it as a group, you can do it individually. Again, it's your own pace. If you don't have access to them, or someone in your district that is not an EL teacher would like to view them, just contact WIDA, or you can contact me and we can give them access so that they can view these as well. And then these are some resources that we have put together as male representatives and myself of things that are being used in district, and we'd like for you to add to this list. If you'd like to tell us what you are using, this was a question that's been posed to us. What are different districts using to support their English learners? So if you'd like to add to this list something you're using, then we would greatly appreciate it. You can put that in the note taker on the questions asked. I will add the question to the note taker. And if you want to list things that you're using, that would be wonderful. We had another question that we were going to ask Rob about what people were doing. Do you remember what that question was? We were going to ask.
No. I mean, I was asking about schedules
school.
for high school newcomers. Yeah.
Yes, high school newcomers. So we'll put that question in the note taker as well. Thank you, Rob. I couldn't remember what the question was all of a sudden. So we'll also add that to the note taker. So if you have responses for that, we would appreciate those as well. And I think that's the last slide. There is a reflection. Something that you learned today, if you want to add that to the note taker, where there's a section for that too. Just we invite you to reflect on what we talked about today and give your input if you're willing. And thank you for being here and for spending this time with us today. Hopefully we shared something you hadn't heard before that will be helpful to you in the future. Thank you, Rob.
Yeah.
Any questions before we end our today's meeting? I'm going to, oh, and don't forget to fill out our evaluation if you would, please. And that's on the note taker as well as here. I'll see if I can get this here and I'll.
Daisy shared in the chat about a Ed Camp unconference on April 1st in St. Louis. So check that out.
And Rob, your conference is coming up?
Yeah, Elevate is going to be in June. We're having Dr. Kate Kinsella as a keynote and Juliana Urtube. Juliana Urtube was a keynote at the WIDA conference back in September. Also, I think Carol Salva's coming to Southwest Missouri, Rhonda's region in April. In April, yes. Yeah. So,
and that is already on my calendar, and it's linked in our last newsletter. And there will be a new newsletter coming out shortly. We'll make sure and link both Rob's and Rhonda's there as well.
Right.
And if you guys ever have anything that you'd like to have in the newsletter, please send it my way. We'd be happy to share anything that you have going on or information that you want to share with the state through that avenue as well. Rob, did you have something else?
No, just have a great week. I hope access testing is done.
Most of them, I think they are finished. It's great to hear. It's a big sigh of relief. All right, my friends, thank you again for joining us today. We will have this recording posted soon. So, and we look forward to seeing you again next month. Next month, we're going to have social emotional learning and some relaxation for teachers.
That'll be fun.
Yeah. I'll stay on in case anyone has any questions.